Welcome to our review on plant diseases and defences. When we're thinking about the diseases that plants can get, we're actually thinking about several different types. And the first one of these are caused by something that's not contagious, so it's not going to spread from plant to plant. It's all down to a lack of mineral ions within the soil in which the plants are growing in. So as a result of that, our plants can't get the minerals they need, and therefore they show deficiency symptoms. For AQA, there are two minerals you need to know about. The first one is nitrates, and the nitrates are needed to make protein so the plant can grow. So a lack of nitrates means that they've got stunted growth, and you can see that in the picture in the bottom left. The second one is magnesium, which is needed to make chlorophyll in our plants. So if there's a lack of magnesium in the soil, then our plant suffers with something called chlorosis, which is just where the leaves look yellow, as you can see on the left of the picture there, which is all down to the fact that there's a lack of chlorophyll present, and chlorophyll is obviously the green pigment in our plants. The second type of disease are those that are caused by pathogens. And in our earlier videos we've looked at these in more detail, but just to remind you of the two you need to know, we've got tobacco mosaic virus, which is caused by a virus, and then we've got rose black spot, which is caused by a fungus. The final type of problem our plants can have is as a result of insect damage. And the insect you need to know about on AQA is the good old aphid. So I've given you a lovely zoomed in close up of it in the bottom left there, and what it looks like when you just look at the plant from a distance. And as you can see, these little aphids can absolutely cover plants, and as a result of their presence they can do an awful lot of damage to them. One thing that we do need to bear in mind though is that plants aren't these poor things that require human intervention to keep them alive. You know, they're not as ridiculous as a giant panda, for example. What we actually have here are organisms that have a whole range of their own defences against disease. And these defences fall into one of three key categories. They're either physical, chemical, or mechanical defences. If we think about the physical defences first of all, then these quite simply are physical barriers that are just reducing the ability of the pathogen to invade the plant in the first instance. So three key ones that you need to know about for your exam. First one are the cellulose cell walls that surround all of our plant cells, and these act as a physical barrier. Downside is that if we have things like the aphids that are feeding on our plants, they're going to cause damage to those cell walls, which then provides an entry route for pathogens. Second one are the waxy cuticles that form that protective barrier across the surface of the leaves. And the third one is the bark on trees. So the bark itself is made of dead cells, which makes it quite tricky for the pathogen to actually get through dead cells to the living bits underneath. And the bark will also flake off, and as the bark falls off, so do any pathogens that are on it. Our second kind of defence is the chemical defence. And what we actually find here is that there's a couple of different ways that the plants can do this. Firstly, they could actually create antibacterial chemicals that will kill any bacteria that then invade. And a good example of this is witch hazel, and you can see that at the top there. Another option available to them is to produce poisons. And the whole idea of producing these poisons is to try to deter any herbivores or insects from eating them. So things like foxgloves in the bottom left there, or deadly nightshade, these produce poisons that will prevent those herbivores eating them and therefore prevent them damaging them. Just as a side note, they're also quite poisonous to humans, so don't eat those plants. The third and final type of defence are the mechanical defences. Now this could be as simple as having thorns or hairs on the outside in order to stop animals touching or eating them and thereby prevent them damaging them. Or it could be something that's a little bit cooler. In the UK woodlands we've actually got a lot of these plants called mimosa. So if you wander through a woodland you'll see them, they're in the middle there on the right hand side. And what makes these plants so cool is that if you touch their leaves, then they actually fold up. So you can see the two on the left there are these very thin looking leaves, because they folded them all in to protect them. So you can imagine if it does it when we touch it, it does it when other organisms, like animals that would have eaten them, would touch them, and it just protects them from damage there. The other thing that plants have actually adapted to do is to actually mimic other organisms to protect them from damage. So passion flower leaf, you can see in the bottom right there, then that one's got those yellow spots on it. It's not some kind of a deficiency, it's actually developed those yellow spots to look like butterfly eggs, because that means a butterfly won't lay its eggs there, and therefore the caterpillars won't eat those leaves as they hatch. So plants aren't just these things that sit there and wait for us to care for them. They've got a range of techniques that they can use to then protect themselves from damage and therefore infection. Hopefully at the end of this video you can recall the different deficiency symptoms of our plants with the examples. You can recall the pathogens which we looked at previously and the idea of insects causing damage. And you can also talk about the ways that plants can defend themselves.